If you are a leader who has recently been laid off or in the position to lay off other people, this message is for you. This past week, I've had the honor and privilege to coach three different leaders. One who's just been laid off, one who was a part of the human resource infrastructure of their organization, coaching others and preparing other leaders for how to be in the layoff. And then a third leader who was a senior leader who had to stand with other leaders around layoffs that she didn't necessarily always didn't agree with. And so I had three different human beings in respect to the layoffs that I was working with this past week. And what I want to say from the position as a coach in these situations that it's always very difficult. It is always very difficult to hold space for people who are in the midst of something that is deeply, deeply personal. For the company, there may be a business case, or for your organization, a logical, rational reason as for why the layoff must happen, the reduction in force must happen. Because of AI, because of budget constraints, because of what's happening in the economy. But for the human beings who are in the midst of the layoff, this is a very personal experience. Being let go of your job touches something very deep. It gets at the heart of our security needs as human beings. Losing your means of employment and or having to be the person who tells someone that they are losing their means of employment taps into our safety, our security, our belonging. It affects how safe we feel in the world and whether or not we believe that we are cared for, if that we will be provided for, that the people, the systems, the organizations, the projects that we invest in are worthwhile, that they will hold us in the midst of change. And this is a very, 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 very human experience. And the emotions that I have seen come up with leaders are fear, fear of how will I survive? How will I pay my rent? How would I pay for the medicines that my parents need or my children's need? Or will I be able to close the gap? I'm already, right? Making ends meet and borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, as they say, as my parents used to say. And so people are in real fear and contraction and worry around that. It also brings up grief. There's a lot of sadness around a role shift or an identity shift, or wondering whether or not who you are will be of value to somebody else within this context. It also brings up a lot of distrust around our systems. One of the leaders I was working with talked about the shock. People didn't see this coming. They felt like just last week or just last month, they were told about how amazing the organization is doing. And so they're wondering, who can I trust? If the leadership is saying one thing on the one day, and then the next week, suddenly 10% of the workforce is being laid off, who can I trust? There's also a sense of overwhelm. We are living in the midst of rapid technological innovation. Everyone is wondering about what AI will do to their life, to their livelihood, how it will affect not only their employment, but the employment opportunities for their children who are in college, or their children who are thinking about going into the workforce, even if they don't go to college. They're watching their grocery prices and their gas prices go up because of these senseless wars that men around the world consistently want to create. And so these are very human experiences. And so today, as I sit with the fear, the grief, the rage, the distrust, the overwhelm of my clients, I wanted to offer a spiritual principle. And that spiritual principle is acceptance. Acceptance. You may be wondering, acceptance? Why do I need to accept the unfairness of the system or accept that people aren't thinking about how to support us as they make these technological innovations? But what I would say is that acceptance does not mean agreement. It doesn't mean you agree with what is happening. Acceptance is also not passivity. It doesn't mean that you do nothing. But what acceptance invites us to do in the midst of knowing this is not about giving up or agreeing, it invites us to stop resisting what's right in front of our face. Stop resisting the present moment. Stop resisting the reality of what is happening. And in that space of accepting your reality, there's a lot of possibility. There's a lot of opportunity for creativity. You know, when I think about the context in which we live in history and technology, there's always been the human anxieties and fears around change and technology. A pencil is a technology, right? The ability to write rather than just to speak, to move from oral storytelling to writing. A pen is a technology. When the printing press started, where they could start to print books in mass, people were wondering whatever will happen to the purity and the sanctity of the artist and the small offering of the craftsman or the artisan. When computers were developed and were brought to mass market, there was fear and fear and anxiety around that. And, you know, when social media came, right, there was fear and anxiety. And people will always say, we're doomed. This is the end of civilization as we know it. We don't know what will happen. And the same thing is happening around artificial intelligence, large language models, AI. And so it's not so much what is happening that many of my clients are reacting to, but it's how we meet the moment. How do we meet this moment of uncertainty, of confusion, of fear, of anxiety around what the technology will do? Because these layoffs were all related to, right? The business case, what was messaged is that this has to do with AI and how it's transforming our workplaces. And so my offering is that this is an opportunity for another spiritual principle, which is vision. And vision is all about what is possible to create in this moment. Once you accept the reality, once you stop resisting it, that's just the beginning of it. What comes next is, what kind of future now do I want to create? Now that I've accepted that this is over, that my colleague will no longer be working here, or that I will no longer be working here in this organization. What kind of future do I want to create? And so vision is what allows us to move from fear to creation, from contraction to expansion, from closed-heartedness to a sense of possibility. Now, I'm not saying that happens overnight. It's important for us to be with our grief, if that's what we need to be with. And we don't really know how long that's going to take within the context of any given organizational change or life change within how we're moving forward. But I want to offer you some practical guidance today. 4 steps, practical guidance. The first piece of practical guidance and wisdom, if you have just received the news that you're going to be laid off, or you are someone who has just had to deliver that news to a beloved colleague or to someone who you know is going to be struggling with very human emotions after that news. The first is to practice the pause. Just pause, slow it down, bring awareness to what you're feeling, honor what you're feeling, the sadness, the fear, the anxiety. Because when we try to rush past it to just get to the next thing or to act as if it doesn't mean anything or get to the next to-do list on our task list, right? We're not really honoring the human experience of what is happening. The second step is to notice the story that's coming up for you in your head. What am I making this mean? Ask yourself, what am I making this mean? Sometimes we assume that a job loss is going to lead to gloom and doom, right? But depending on the story you tell yourself about that change, it will determine the experience that you have of that change in that moment and how you're able to meet the next moment with vision, with creativity, with a sense of possibility. The third step is to stay connected. Don't isolate. If you have a friend, a loved one, someone that you trust who is that you can talk to and share your emotions with, reach out to them. That might not be somebody in your workplace. That may be someone outside of your workplace. If there's a therapist, if there's a coach, someone that can create a safe enough container, a safe space, right? A container of love for you to emote, to be angry, to talk out loud, or to be joyful. You know, everybody has different reactions, right? Then find that person. And the third is return to what you can influence and control in this right now moment. Return to what you can influence and control. So again, practice the pause. Give yourself a moment to just be aware of your human emotions. Notice the story and the meaning you're making of it. What are you telling yourself about this? Stay connected. Don't isolate. And then fourth, return to something very small that you can influence in this right now moment. And so just for today, if you do nothing else, I invite you to take 5 minutes with these two questions. The first is, what am I believing right now about what this means for me? Regardless of what side of the layoff you're on. What am I believing right now about what this means for me? What story am I telling myself about what this means for me? And the second question is, what kind of future do I want to help create? Now that this has happened, whether I'm the one who's left behind or whether I'm the one who's leaving, what do I want in this next phase of life, in this next phase of the future, in this context? So just write it down. You don't have to fix anything today with these questions. Just be with these questions. Just look at them. Just be with yourself in this moment. Be with your humanness in this moment. Because we don't transform the world by reacting to it and staying in the loop of that reaction. We transform it by how we choose actively to move forward. And we can't choose unless we practice the pause. And so with that today, I will say, I am Jackie. I'm the founder and CEO of Earthseed. And here we believe that the future of leadership is sacred because it is rooted in love. And that starts today with the love of yourself. Loving yourself enough to be with your humanness, to move through the uncertainty of AI, the layoffs, all of the changes, and what's next for us in 2026 and beyond. Thank you for listening. Thank you for receiving this. And thank you for sharing it. Share it with somebody who you think might need to hear this message today. Peace.